Well, Dr. Stan here at the Genesis Communication Network, and everybody is just so surprised. The market back up almost 500 points today after dropping 500 points yesterday, and they explain the volatility by the fact that there was a good jobs report. And ladies and gentlemen, this is all simple garbage. The Working Group on Financial Markets, a government agency that manipulates the stock market, but you're never going to hear that on the media. But certainly go up on the internet if you want to check it. Working Group on Financial Markets, so the plunge protection team, and their job is to manipulate the market, to control your perception, to control your reality, control your emotions. And ladies and gentlemen, we are governed. Our minds are molded, our taste form, our ideas suggested largely by men we have never heard of. And of course, one group of men is the Working Group on Financial Markets. Check it out on the internet. You'll find it exists. Its purpose is to manipulate the stock market. Well, that is the background, though. Let's go to somebody who will give us the straight information on what is really going on, and that is Joel Skousen. Hi, Joel. How are you today?
I'm just fine, Dr. Stan. It's good to be with you.
And what are we going to be talking about?
Well, just what you started off with, the first topic, the Dow Jones Industrial declined just over 1,000 points this past week, and now it's up 500 points in a day almost. Toward the bottom of the slide, we observed a couple of strong efforts by the plunge protection team to halt the slide with massive injections of free money provided by the Fed, and that's how they can do this with unlimited funds. They're not having, these are brokers like Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan that manipulate this plunge protection team, and they have a tap on the Fed which allows them to inject billions of dollars, not of their own money, and nobody has to account for it. So is this sudden, 500 or 480 some point reversal the proverbial dead cat bounce or something else? Now, for those of your listeners who don't know what a dead cat bounce is, it's when a market is in free fall or going into depression, sometimes it will have a bounce upward, but it doesn't mean that it's going to stay up there. Well, in this case, because of my tracking the plunge protection team, I believe that it will start another rise again. It doesn't mean that any of the fundamentals have changed. This is just pure manipulation. People make money by shorting the market on the way down, and I knew that they were going to be able to short the market because Standard & Poor's did the downgrading of U.S. bonds to AA was certainly an establishment rating agency, as well as all the other three, Moody's and Fitch. So I don't think there's any doubt that the insiders knew that this was coming. Well, the downgrade, of course, started only with one of the three major agencies. That could be viewed as a carefully crafted means of easing the U.S. into the downhill slide that will continue for many years and allow profit-taking along the way for insiders. They made money both up and down on the market, especially when they turn around a strong trend. Now, I think they tried to turn it around a couple of days ago when it had a 200-point dead cat bounce, and then it continued on downward. But, there was just a hue and cry among all the TV commentators that, this is a great time to buy. Everybody's pushing some, and when you know that they're getting to the point where people can put out the view that that it's gone way too far and it's got to turn around, that's the time for the plunge protection team to really come in earnest and turn things around, which they appeared to have done today. Now, this may not be the end. I mean, there could be people that say, no, it's not going to stay, and I'm going to take profits and get out of this market. So we could see another downturn tomorrow, but we'll just have to watch. In any case, nothing will be stable from here on out, Stan. Nothing. As Market Watch pointed out when he was talking about Standard & Poor's, don't forget how the SEC investigation of the sector turned up internal emails at the rating agencies with pre-crisis comments like, this was before the housing crisis, comments like, this is an email from one of the rating agencies, a derivative security could be structured by cows and we would rate it, or let's hope we are all wealthy and retired by the time this house of cards falters. So that was proof, in fact, that the rating agencies knew that they were rating these mortgage-backed securities higher than they were really worth by a lot, and knew that it was a house of cards. Yet now S&P and their peers chastise the U.S. and others for their irresponsible finances, and governments hang their heads and nod with shame. Well, not everybody has responded this way, though. Italy, for one, answered outlook downgrades of its debt by having its police raid the offices of both Moody's and S&P. Of course, many people outside the ratings agencies agree that the U.S. doesn't deserve to be AAA, but a lot of these folks also think the nation's debt should have seen ratings cut many years ago. That's absolutely true. Well, many of the principals leading these rating agencies are members of the Council on Foreign Relations, so it's highly unlikely that the S&P decision to downgrade the U.S. was a surprise to the establishment. There are always those insiders that know of the plan in advance and position themselves, as I said, to short the market on the way down, and even during planned terrorist events, as happened in 9/11. Michael Pinto had these cogent comments. He said, "I'd like to offer, unfortunately, congratulations to Standard & Poor's for trying to improve their services. After getting so much wrong, they are making an honest effort to get something right and have taken down the U.S. credit rating. And for that, they're being excoriated by everyone from Tim Geithner to Warren Buffett. The major criticism stems from the idea that the U.S. has a printing press and therefore can never default on principal and interest payments. Therefore, some pundits are claiming that the credit card agencies had no right to consider the decline of the dollar and the reduction of its purchasing power when making their determination of treasuries, changing it to AA+. Warren Buffett, who of course is an insider shill for government, said today that he would continue to buy treasuries even though they returned zero interest, and that the central bank would guarantee any such default would be impossible. In other words, what he and others are saying is that the United States doesn't need to offer any interest at all for any of its debt and shouldn't be bothered by taxing its citizens either. If investing geniuses like Warren Buffett are willing to buy treasuries regardless of their yield, then why bother going through the ruse at all? Well, there's got to be a reason. I mean, obviously, there's no financial incentive to buy treasuries if there's no interest, and they certainly aren't going to rise in yield. Therefore, the powers that be have to keep up public confidence for several more years. They've got to extend this out, Stan, in my opinion, so that the crash doesn't come before they can pull off a war, which will give them cover for everything they've done, and no one will even remember that we had a debt problem. After sufficient decline, where analysts are begging for a recovery, the plunge protection team is fully capable of engineering a reversal like we've seen on today, Thursday. Look at the run-up stocks during the past 2 years. There were no fundamentals to justify the rise of the Dow to over 12,000 during this deep recession, which is still ongoing. What we just witnessed this week was the collapse of that bubble. It could go further, a lot further, if the powers that be would allow fundamentals to express their full dissatisfaction with our insolvable debt problem. But I don't think that's going to happen, in today's performance by the manipulation of the market seems to prove that point. The presence of out-of-the-blue reversals with large injections of cash from the Fed through partners in the plunge protection team indicates, and this is important, that the powers that be don't intend to pull the plug on the economy. But even with the inevitable manipulations of the markets, the long-term trend is down as the world wakes up to the fact that more debt never solved the debt problem. It only prolongs the end point and makes the consequences ultimately worse. I don't think there's ever been a time since the Great Depression when the world has lost such confidence in the powers that be's ability to fix things. At best, the people believe government can soften things, soften the blow, but more and more people are awakening to the fact that there's no real solution once you get in this deep. Well, Time magazine and others were anxious to blame the downgrade on Tea Party recalcitrants at the raising of the debt limit, and particular blame was leveled at Congressman Ron Paul. But if anything, Paul has been completely vindicated by this debacle, having predicted it would come to this eventually. In short, what we are witnessing is a repricing of asset values to reflect the reality of the liquidity crisis in both Europe and the debt crisis in the U.S.
I share your concerns, Ray, and I think it's a very, very difficult ride in this next coming months and years. Well, hang on there. We'll be back in just a moment with Joel Skousen right here at Genesis.
America's #1 source for independent talk radio for over a decade. We are the GCN Radio Network.
Well, Dr. Stanton back here at the Genesis Communication Network. Our guest is Joel Skousen. We're talking certainly about the plunge protection team. We're talking about the manipulation of the stock market, the fact that certainly the rating agencies and so many of the people who are involved in this are tied into what I call the Brotherhood of Darkness, and certainly the Council on Foreign Relations is one of the key organizations there. But of course, Joel feels that this is going to continue, this manipulation of the progressive destruction of our monetary system, until, of course, the powers that be bring about a war with the Muslim world, and I could not agree more. And you, ladies and gentlemen, you should prepare yourself, and I think you'd be quite justified in talking to others about the coming war. Now, this is the last thing on the mind of the American people. But suddenly, if you talk about it, and as these things begin to unfold and things get worse, hopefully the people will listen to the other things you talk about, and that would be the spiritual component of what's going on. So without further ado, Joel, go right ahead.
Well, the only correction I would make to your introductory remarks there, Stan, is that I believe that even though there will be a war with the Muslim world coming up very soon when they attack Iran, nevertheless, the real war that I'm talking about that will cover and allow them to default without blame will be a nuclear war with Russia and China, which I think is at least a decade off.
Well, that will be
big one.
And I think come after the Muslim war, won't it?
Pardon me?
That will come after the war with the Muslim world.
That's right. I don't believe that the Muslim war in the Middle East will involve a world war, but will be the icing on the cake of U.S. occupation and interference, and create an absolute image of the U.S. and Israel as the bullies of the world. Well, going back to the economic situation, former Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan made a dramatic admission last Sunday on NBC's Meet the Press. He ruled out the chance of a U.S. default following S&P's decision to downgrade. He said the United States can pay any debt it has because we can always print money to do that. So there's zero probability of default. Well, Greenspan is only correct in the sense that the U.S. will never openly declare a default on the debt. However, creating money to cover the debt is a form of default, only more insidious as it is hidden and steals value over a long period of time from all holders of dollars through inflation. So just who are Greenspan and Bernanke trying to fool by taking this hidden route to default? Well, the answer is as many people as they can and for as long as they can. That is the essence of their strategy. The powers that be know that war is their only way out of this mess, at least to provide a medium to shift the blame. And so they must delay the consequences of debt and inflation until China and Russia are ready to strike. And that's probably, as I said, still a decade away. Everything you will hear on the news about solutions will be mere diversion, a mere diversion to keep the system going till their exit plan can be implemented. These are not stupid people, but conniving globalists who intend to use this and other crises to justify shoving us into a new world order. Forget about China having the power to destroy the dollar by dumping. They could only destroy what value they traded for those dollars that they hold in reserve. Remember that what former Secretary John Connolly told the Europeans in 1973, it's our dollar, but it's your goddamn problem. He's right. The blame may ultimately fall upon the money printing Fed, but the consequences of that money printing fall squarely upon those who hold diluted dollars. As Jim Quinn said in the Burning Platform this week, he said, quote, "The politicians and bankers who control the developed world have made the choice to print money and create more debt as their solution to an unpayable debt problem. Europe, Japan, and the U.S., virtually every country in the world want to devalue their way out of a debt problem created over the last 40 years. It has become a race to the bottom with no winners. Every country can't devalue their currency simultaneously without blowing up the entire world monetary systems." I think he's wrong about that because everyone, in fact, is devaluating their currency, and it isn't blowing up the whole system yet. He says they are going to try. Well, actually, it helps. This is an important point to remember in terms of economic theory. When you're dealing with every nation in the world having a fiat currency, it helps if everyone is devaluating their currency at the same rate. Then it doesn't appear as if anybody's inflating more than another. In that way, inflation doesn't show up as one currency falling in relationship to another. The dollar would be doing a lot worse if it were being compared to other currencies that weren't being inflated, but it isn't. All currencies are being debased. The only reason the dollar is falling is it is doing much more money creation than the others combined. If they were all if they were all inflating at 3%, you wouldn't see any difference in the currencies, and nobody would notice in terms of the currency markets that one was being inflated over the other. Only the individual citizens in each nation notice the inflation because prices keep rising. Well, part of the panic in the markets is that there's no safe haven other than gold, which has burst through the 1,800 per ounce price level. Europe is no longer an alternative for Western investors. It doesn't help confidence that Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner said Europe needs to boost the size of its emergency bailout fund to stem a sovereign debt crisis threatening to engulf two of its largest economies. Well, Zero Hedge warns also that Germany will soon balk over the fact that it is pledging its entire economy to bail out an insolvent Europe. Well, that moment has come. As a reminder, there's a stopgap announcement by the European Central Bank to expand its purchases of sovereign debt in secondary market Italian and Spanish bonds as a precursor to full monetization that comes online in September. That's using what Geithner says this emergency bailout facility. He says if Germany is now against this bailout, which appears to be the case, it pretty well means game over. And my comment is don't count on it. Germany, I believe, will yield to globalist pressures to buy into the bailout. As for those saying China will gladly step in and fund a $5 trillion European shortfall, they may want to read the following article from Reuters that says, Italian Economy Minister Giulio Tremonti said on Thursday that Asian investors are reluctant to buy Italian bonds because it sees that they're not being bought by the European Central Bank. It's really interesting. The European Central Bank and the G7 conference talked about this should be a market solution, and yet they aren't willing to buy sovereign debt. How do they expect the markets to buy sovereign debt? Meanwhile, China condemned U.S. profligacy and called for a new global reserve currency. Speculation about China's yuan serving as a new global currency are completely unfounded, in my opinion. The only way the dollar got into that position as a world currency was by guaranteeing redemption of dollars in a fixed amount of gold. No government can afford to offer that nowadays. So among all the other fiat currencies in the world, none have any degree of trust or guarantee of stability, especially China, which is the least transparent of all currencies. Would anyone trust China not to inflate their currency out the gazoo? No one would. The idea of a basket of currencies becoming a new reserve standard under the IMF special drawing rights is also unworkable. That would require that each nation constituting a portion of that basket of currencies would have to agree to restrict their money creation to a uniform equal amount, just as the European Union requires. But as we all well know, the EU nations couldn't live within those restrictions and found ways to cheat by borrowing money under the table, leading to this debt crisis.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. Well, after stand back here at the Genesis Communication Network, and our guest is Joel Skousen. And before we go on, Joel, I'd like you to tell our listeners how they can subscribe to the World Affairs Brief and get your regular commentary there.
Well, my World Affairs Brief is showcased on my website, worldaffairsbrief.com. People can get a free sample issue by emailing me at editor@worldaffairsbrief. Also, on my website, joelskousen.com, there is a listing of all of the books that I have on the market on preparedness, strategic relocation. The new third edition is available. which is almost an all-new rewrite of this popular best-selling book with color maps of all the best areas in the country and analysis of every region, including foreign countries. It also talks about the secure home, my largest work on everything from security to self-sufficiency. And these books are available from RadioLiberty.
By calling 1-800-544-8927, and they're certainly among our bestsellers. That's 1-800-544-8927, and that's strategic relocation, the secure home, and certainly building a safe room in your home. Go right ahead, Joel.
Well, let's switch topics and talk about the evidence of a falsified death of Osama bin Laden. C.T. Campbell provided a short review of the implausibility of the U.S. version of events. He says the review of the problems with the official story are simply incredible. The lack of any tangible evidence, the massive changes to the official story that came out in days immediately following the raid all add up to something being very wrong. There was no shootout, no wives used as human shields, no wives or children taken into custody that had been produced, no video of the raid. The White House did not watch the raid live as originally indicated. Now, as many predicted, the people we are told took part in the raid are all gone as a result of a recent helicopter crash. We're told then that the Osama bin Laden body was immediately buried at sea, and we have almost instantaneous DNA results that it was him. No pictures, no... his body isn't released under the excuse that it would still instill hatred for the United States. Not only do we see no Osama bin Laden body, but we see no captive wives or children. We have no SEAL team members to give their account in disguises to conceal their identity, and never will after the recent helicopter crash. In the days that follow, we do get some photos of the people who were told were killed inside the residence. Now there exists much more specific witness testimony that directly contradicts the U.S. version of events. Paul Craig Roberts brought this to the attention of the world, an important Pakistani national TV interview with Mohammed Bashir, who lives right next door to the alleged compound of Osama bin Laden. And his cousin apparently was allowed to grow a vegetable garden inside that comment. So certainly the cousin is going to know an awful lot about whether or not Osama bin Laden really lived there. But strangely enough, he's not available. He's been taken away by the authorities and has been told not to talk to anybody. In Bashir's account, every member of the landing party in the helicopter and everyone brought into the house died when the helicopter exploded on liftoff. Here are the key points of Bashir's interview, and I edited it somewhat because it was somewhat incoherent and out of chronological order, and I put it back into chronological order. The reporter asked him, where were you standing when all of this happened? He says, inside the house on top of the roof. I was not in the house, just on top of a flat roof, lying down on the roof, lying and watching this and what was happening. The helicopter came and circled and dropped some people there. After that, the helicopter returned and went back. How many people were they? They were 10 or 12 people, he said. After it left, that is, after the helicopter left, and for approximately 20 minutes, there behind us on those mountains, it kept going around, circling the tops of the mountains. After 20 minutes, it returned. When it returned, he said, at that time, there were 2 more helicopters arriving, but did not land. One came from the west and one came from the north. So there was only one helicopter that landed and dropped its passengers. The people who were dropped from the craft, where our gate was, they banged on them hard and shouted, don't come out, don't do this, don't do that. If you come out, you will be shot. We will do this, we will do that. All the people who were dropped by, all of them, he said, spoke Pashto. That's the Afghani language, Pashto. Who were these people? Bashir. This I do not know. Those who were dropped from the helicopter were those people. Reporter, somebody else told me that they spoke Pashto. They were Pashtun, he said, and that's an indication that he thought that they were native speakers, not Americans. We did not know if they were working for the Americans. We did not know if they were working for Pakistan, but we do know that we do not know if they were army or civilian people, but they spoke Pashto. Now later, Bashir hypothesizes that they might have been American agents speaking Pashto. Agents, he said, can speak all sorts of languages. It could be that it is the American Army and they speak Pashto, and people would link that to their own, think that it was their own people. I disagree with that. Army SEAL or Navy SEALs are not trained linguists who can speak fluently. They might know a few words or phrases to be able to tell somebody to put their hands up, but they certainly couldn't pass themselves off as native speakers to a native listener. He continues, he says, the same helo returned to pick the people up, and there was an explosion within it. One helicopter landed down here. The second helicopter came from above and went towards Monero, but did not land. No other helicopter landed, he said. When the first helo approached for landing, there was an explosion within it, and there was fire within it immediately. The helicopter was burning. They are saying we killed Osama here. After that, they picked him up and took him away. Well, how did they do that, he says? This is what we are thinking. How could they possibly have taken him away when we saw the helicopter crash and burn? How did you get inside the compound, asked the reporter. Bashir, the gate was open, and when there was a fire, the gate was open. Doesn't sound like a secure compound for Osama bin Laden to me. He said, you came from upstairs to downstairs? I came down, he said, from my own house into the gully. Now, gully in Urdu means sidewalk or pavement between two houses. I didn't go alone into the other house. 200 other people went inside. Everybody saw it. All 200 people saw the burning helicopter and the dead bodies? Yes, everybody saw this. Whoever went inside saw everything. In the helicopter, you saw dead people? We saw dead people, he says. This we could not count. Within the compound, there was fire. The gate was open. We entered the gate. At that time, the Army had not arrived. When the helicopter exploded, it scattered everywhere. One piece fell over there, one piece here. A lot of pieces fell into the gully outside. They reached up to the gully in our house, and also some pieces managed onto my rooftop. Tell me, 2 helicopters came and lifted and took the rest of the people out? No, he said. They did not take the rest of the people because they did not even land. One came from the west and left toward the north, and one came from the north and left toward the south. They did not land. Now, this is just amazing, Dr. Stan, because it means that nobody got out with Osama bin Laden to dump him in the ocean. They all died in this operation. Reporter says, besides you, why is nobody else saying these things? Why are you alone in this? Bashir answers, well, look what we have seen. That is what we are saying, and we are speaking for this reason, that we are sad that such a humble and nice people of our town that has never seen such events, no fighting, no arguments, no animosity, is subjected to this. These are nice people in this town. They've been branded as terrorists, and everyone has been threatened not to speak. Well, where is your cousin, said the reporter. This is the one who reportedly grew vegetables inside the compound of Osama. My cousin was at the time in the house. Where did he go with you? He was with me, but I did not notice when he was picked up. Has he returned yet? Yes, he has returned. They picked him up and took him away. What is he saying then? I've not met him yet. He's at home and they will not let him come out. We are not allowed to visit him. They will not let him come out. And that's the end of the interview. Well, that's quite a different story, Stan, than the official version. And it indicates that there was no successful, capturing of Osama bin Laden. And it shows that all of the Navy SEALs and the helicopter crews died at that site.
The GCN Radio Network, providing the world with hard-hitting talk radio. GCN. Great talk radio starts here.
Well, Dr. Stan back here at the Genesis Communication Network, and of course our guest is Joel Skousen. Joel, go ahead, pick up the story.
Well, we're talking about the shocking revelations of the eyewitness neighbor to the Osama bin Laden compound, and indicating that, in fact, all died in the helicopter. None of the other 2 helicopters came down to rescue anyone, that the entire crew and all of the supposed people, died there that were leading that operation. So it's a great variance with the official story. Well, we have to ask now, is there a link to recent deaths in the same Navy, deaths of the same Navy SEAL team? There are some strange contradictions in the highly publicized crash of an Army CH-47 Chinook helicopter in Afghanistan that supposedly included the very members of SEAL Team 6 that allegedly captured and killed Osama bin Laden. This is very convenient, but one, if Mr. Bashir has testified, no Navy SEALs survived the Special Ops Hilo crash in Abbottabad, the government would need to falsify their deaths later in order to be able to explain to the SEAL team families why their hero husbands were never coming home. Number two, it would also mean that Osama's visit to Fort Campbell, Kentucky did not occur in front of the actual SEAL Team 6, but their larger unit. The fact that Obama showed up with cameras rolling at the return of the bodies from the recent Chinook helicopter crash indicates that this is a continuation of the big lie. Number three, SEAL Team 6 has its own special ops stealth helicopters and doesn't normally fly on Army choppers. Why was this particular SEAL team inserted into an Army Reserve transport helicopter and mixed with other military operations? Number four, the government's claim that it has killed the two who shot down the HT-47 is just ludicrous. I'd like to know just how you could know that unless you were controlling the shoot-down operation. That shows that either they're lying or complicit. Either one is bad. Number five, the government's already changing its story about who was on the doomed helicopter. According to CNN, the Pentagon will put the death toll of Navy SEALs on last weekend's downing of the CH-47 at 17 instead of 22. Officials say information that has come in also indicates that not all of the SEALs were assigned to a top-secret Navy unit, as they said. Only 15 were SEALs belonging to SEAL Team 6. Two others were SEAL teams assigned to regular Navy Special Operations units. 5 additional Navy personnel worked with SEALs, and then there were some Army and Afghan, or some Air Force forward air controllers and some Afghans. Let me tell you, as a former military pilot, that there is always a written manifest for every flight containing the names of every person on board when setting out from a regular base of operations. There is no way the military could have been confused about who was on board and later have to change their story. Someone, in my opinion, Stan, is scrambling to coordinate whoever is supposed to be dead from those who are not dead.
Well, it's tragic. Yeah. It's tragic when the government lies to the American people. It keeps changing the story and changing the story, and there's increasing disillusionment on the part of the American people. They realize they're being lied to and becoming disillusioned with our government without understanding it's not our government. Our government, I believe, altruistic. The ideas of our government are fine. It's just that wicked and evil people have taken control, and they are the ones who are lying. Go right ahead, Joel.
Well, it's interesting that Alex Jones made a prediction on Infowars.com several months ago. He said that they predicted that the spin doctors would stage a crash so that they could say when the SEALs died. This is an old government trick all over the world that has been caught. They've been caught pulling in the past. Mainstream sources are seizing upon claims that Taliban took credit for downing the helicopter, but that means nothing. Media instantly ran reports that Al-Qaeda was responsible for the bombing and shootings in Norway when none of those were involved. Well, Mr. Campbell, who I quoted from earlier, concludes, he says, "We may never know the true story. If I were to guess, someone got off a lucky shot against the helicopter. There was an accidental explosion of ordnance on board. Since this whole thing, in my opinion, was designed to boost Obama's declining ratings and status, it could not come out with the truth that it had ended in a colossal mess. The recent crash of the helicopter in Afghanistan may have been staged to provide a cover story and give closure to the release of bodies for people killed months ago in the raid against Osama bin Laden. It might also have been used to eliminate any witnesses who survived the debacle."
Of course, I remember, Chris, the execution of Osama bin Laden came when the whole controversy was arising of the falsification of the birth certificate. And what they did is they came up with that story about bin Laden and drew attention away from the fact that it was very obvious that Osama bin Laden's full-length birth certificate had been certainly forged. And it's amazing how quickly you forget the things that happened at that time. So most people have, but at the time I thought, how convenient. Now, of course, we shift the entire discussion from who falsified Obama's birth certificate to the death of Osama, and you can get them awfully confused. Hey, we're out of time. God bless you, Joel. Look forward to talking to you tomorrow morning.
Thank you, Stan.
God bless and bye-bye. All right, well, that was Joel Skousen, and certainly I think his remarks are very apropos. Remember, the stock market is manipulated by the Working Group on Financial Markets, but nobody is going to tell you that, and so I think this very real question of whether we've been told any of the truth about the death of Osama bin Laden. Because we believe he's been dead for a long period of time, and this whole thing was contrived to draw attention to the fact that if you go back and read what was happening when Osama was supposedly executed. Why, of course, there was a great deal of controversy about Obama's full birth certificate was obviously falsified, but they had to draw attention away from that, so they came up with this cover story. Our minds are molded, our tastes are formed, our ideas are suggested largely by men we've never heard of. We live in a totally imaginary world where reality is usually scoffed at and illusion is usually king. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the time I need to remind you my ministry is primarily listener-supported, and if you're in a position to help us, we'd love to hear from you. Our telephone number is 1-800-544-8927. We picked up another couple of stations, and certainly we're approaching about 65 outlets every single week. If you're in a position to help, we'd love to hear from you. If you're not, well, of course, we ask you to pray for Radio Liberty, for our provision and for our protection. We're always looking for advertisers. We have some wonderful advertisers that really do help us, and certainly we appreciate that so much. But if you knew of one or two more, well, we'd be in pretty good shape, and we could really start working on expansion. And then, of course, we hope that you'll get my book, Brotherhood of Darkness. You'll get the new, relatively new, 4-CD set on the Dark Awakening. The Dark Awakening. We're carrying the book, The Black Awakening. It goes into the mind control programs that are being used to prepare people for certainly of creating mass chaos in this country. These are Manchurian candidates who've been created by the dark side of government and by the satanic organizations that they work in conjunction with. We have an excellent book. It's called The CIA Doctors, written by Dr. Colin Ross. That's The CIA Doctors. We have a DVD on mind control by Bob Fletcher. We have one on Operation Monarch, a DVD. We recommend them both. They're available by calling 1-800-544-8927. And then, of course, we hope that you'll want to get my talk. It's on DVD on the Dark Secret and on the Forbidden Secret. They're two separate talks. And then, of course, the syllabuses go with them. If you have not yet seen the DVDs on They Sold Their Souls to rock and roll, why, of course, it's well worthwhile watching the 3-hour, the 4-hour, or the 10-hour version. Why is this important? Why, because our music has been taken over by truly demonic forces who stole their souls for rock and roll. I'm talking about the Beatles. I'm talking about Ozzy Osbourne. I'm talking about many of our major entertainers. You will never forget they sold their souls for rock and roll, put forward by our good friend Joe Schimmel. So there's so many things that we have available. If you would like one of our catalogs, we'd be glad to send you one free of charge. We're suggesting that you make your preparations, you lay in a good supply of food. If you don't have a purifier, the Berkey, get them. If you need to lay in a good supply of health products, and certainly they're available. I'm talking about the vitamins and minerals and herbs and things that you really want to have on hand, because we don't know when the shortages are going to come, but they could come literally overnight. You should have a supply of potassium hydrate, not take it unless there's a nuclear attack, but have it on hand, because if something were to happen, you wouldn't be able to get any of these items. Our number 1-800-544-8927, our webpage, RadioLiberty.com. We ask you to pray for America, to pray for revival, but please pray for Radio Liberty, our provision and our protection.